All right. Hi, hello. Hi, everyone. I believe we're live right now from Los Angeles. In fact, all four of us are in the LA area, and we're very excited to be here with you today. We have the Techstars music team on board, Bob, Jen, and Emily. They will spend a couple of minutes to introduce themselves. In the meantime, just a quick hello from me. I am Andrea Magdalena, the founder of shesaid.so. I'm originally from Romania, went to university in London, spent a few years there, about 6 or 7 years there before moving to LA. I've always worked at the intersection of music and technology. In fact, I started in tech and kind of got swooped over to music with my first music tech job for a startup called Mixcloud. I was employee number 6, and so I was very close to the founding members. I got a very good understanding of all sides of the business, as well, both from a music and a tech perspective. So I feel like that's been an invaluable lesson to me that made me realize that the future of music is in technology. So without further ado, I took those values with me in everything that I've done since then. And I brought them into my work with shesaid.so. I brought them into my work with Microsoft, in the advertising space, in the artist management space. And now I'm very excited to have the Techstars music team with us to tell us more about the accelerator program they're running, what that means, and how that could be of help to your next big idea. Bob, Jen, Emily, such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you so much once again for your time. Let's pass the mic around and start with some introductions.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Bob Maslowski. I'm the managing director of Techstars Music, which means it's my job to make our investments and manage our portfolio. So in a broad sense, it's my fault, and I'm accountable for it. And the high level on the program itself is that Techstars Music is a collaboration between our venture capital and the global music business. So we have what we call member companies, Avex, Amazon Music, Peloton, Warner Music, Sony, Concord, Entertainment One, Royalty Exchange, Bill Silva Entertainment. These companies, they're not just our LPs, they are our LPs. They invest capital in the program and into our fund, but they're also our partners in helping run the program. They do diligence on startups, they do pilot programs and experiments and campaigns with startups. They make introductions. They're helpful on the capital raising front, and they're also actually strategic investors into our portfolio companies after they leave the program. So you could think about our program as talent scouting. I'm not a VC, I'm a talent scout. It's my job to find 10 companies a year that we can put capital into that will then grow up to enter the venture ecosystem. And then we help capitalize those companies and work with them and provide strategic BD and access and assistance and a network, a global network of other Techstars alums, mentors, investors, right? We run 50 programs worldwide, Techstars does. This is just one of those. And so we're supporting those founders for the life of their businesses. Jen, your turn.
My turn. Hey, I'm Jen Hall. I'm the director of the program. My job is primarily to take the members that Bob was speaking of and act as the conduit between them and our founders that we invest in to make sure that we are providing BD opportunities. If there's any pushing through any sort of POCs and help with follow-on funding, with navigating those large giant corporations to the benefit of our founders, just help the program go as smoothly as possible.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Coleman. I'm the program manager for Techstars Music. I pretty much make sure the program runs. I facilitate all the logistics, I help with program planning. I'm also the main contact between founders and mentors. So we have a group of 300 plus mentors, and I make sure all the communications are running smoothly between them and making sure just the program runs smoothly and everything runs well.
Fab. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves and helping our audience get to know you better. My first question will be just a general question about Techstars Music to give an overview of how it works. Before we jump into that, I also want to take a moment to note that we have some questions from our community that they submitted in advance. We'll take those, but also feel free, if any questions come up as we go through the conversation, make sure to leave them in the chat box, in the comment. If you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn, leave them as comments. We have moderators keeping an eye on things, and they will make sure that those questions reach us. That's pretty much it for now. Bob, or whoever wants to take this question, actually, let's hear about the Techstars Music Accelerator, how it works. You already gave us a little bit of insight in terms of how your partners are involved and the global music ecosystem is involved. How does it work? Where does it, how does Techstars work, first and foremost?
Sure. I think it's good for Bob to explain the thesis, and our dirty little secret is that we don't invest in music companies. So
yeah. Maybe we'll do that, and then I'll have Jen, you can take a couple seconds to talk about how it goes back and forth during the program for members, and Emily, you can talk sort of like what is the overview, what's the commitment time wise, what happens to founders, what do they do? Was that a fair division of it? Okay. So Techstars in general, we run accelerator programs around the world, 50 of them. They're mentorship-driven accelerators. So we're looking for 10 companies. We're going to invest $120,000 into each of them. That comes out of our fund. In this calendar year, and we'll probably talk a little more about it later in the call. We have matching capital from some of our member companies into those selected founders who meet our diversity and inclusion commitments. So we'll talk a little bit about the changes we're making on that front in a minute. But you think about it as $120,000 worth of capital into the company. The companies in a normal year would move into our office for 13 weeks. This year we'll run entirely virtually because it's not safe to put 75 people in an office every day with 300 people coming in to meet them and do meetings. So this year we'll do that virtually. But the purpose of that is sort of to introduce them to the mentors and connections and network that they will need to help grow their business. So if you think about that 13 weeks in our office, you're dividing it into 3 sections. One is mentorship. What's the strategy of your business? Who do you need to meet? What needs to happen for you to develop? And in the middle, there's sort of execution. Now that you've met those people, you have that strategic advice, you've got your business sort of pointed in the right direction, or you know what the achievement that is that you need to get to the next step, go and do that. And we will help you with that. And that often includes more mentorship around very specific sort of technical tasks or marketing or go-to-market strategy. And then the last third is around preparation for financing. Does your product roadmap tell the same story as your org chart? Does your org chart tell the same story as your financial model? Does your financial model tell the same story of your business as your pitch deck would? These are really important storytelling devices for founders to showcase the opportunity to investors and also to potential employees and talent that you'll need to grow those businesses. So for music, we have a thesis around the global streaming and the transition to sort of interactive entertainment was going to rip up every single best practice in music, right? We're all going to gigs we're not going to gigs now, but when we were going to gigs, we're going to gigs with supercomputers in our pockets. Now we're watching gigs online and participating in that. We have an expectation that we will have access to artists and to be able to interact with them directly. The way artists are discovered is different. The way content is monetized will be different and is changing every day. And so we think that without having to invest in the primary music listening experience, because that's sort of covered by the economics of very large companies at this point and hard for startups to compete there, we can invest in and around that music ecosystem and help create a bunch of giant companies. So to Jen's point, and as a good way to segue around that, we're not trying to invest in music companies. We're trying to invest in companies solving problems for music. So do you use music as a toehold? Do you have a technical solution that could also work in sports? Do you have, is your company focused around live events? Is your company focused around e-commerce and merchandise or product creation around that's tied to content? All of those things are interesting to us. And if you look at our portfolio, you'll see a whole bunch of companies that interact almost on the daily with our member companies, but would not be classified as music companies by other investors.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that the reason why, you know, we've had the success we've had, I think, in the music vertical is because we can play so fast and loose, and we can really iterate products so much quicker because of the relationships that the program brings to the founders. You know, we can make a phone call and get you backstage access to wherever to test your technology for if you're doing something with security, with ingress egress. Like, we can do all that stuff. And to just say just music as just a huge vertical, I mean, that's everything that touches music, right? That's the merch. So that we're talking e-commerce, we're talking live venue experiences, like we're talking security, we're talking, you know, everything almost besides the actual making of music. You know, and further to Bob's point, in terms of the way we work with our membership, you know, they're tied into, you know, we thread them into the entire process along the way to, no matter what founder we talk to, we want to make sure, whether you get into our program or not, that we provide some value for taking the time to spend it with us and to pitch us your idea. So if that's making a meaningful connection at Amazon Music, or if it's making a connection at Peloton, you know, we're grateful to bring those people in the recruiting process. So whether or not they come to our program or not, we're still giving you the access that we can give you however we can. Because ultimately, you know, we're very founder first. We want to make sure everyone succeeds. You just might not be for us, but that doesn't mean that someone within the membership can't help you one way or another.
And then in terms of commitment and how program's structured, Bob talked about it a little bit, but it is a 13-week program. It is time intensive. It is work intensive. What you put into the program is what you're going to get out of the program. So as Bob mentioned, it's kind of divided into thirds. The first third is meeting with mentors, pitching your company, getting feedback, iterating, etc. The second third is really building. And then the third is leading you up to demo day, which is where you're going to get to pitch your company in front of our community and the community of investors and music execs, etc. Alongside that, all throughout the 13-week accelerator, we'll also be having workshops, teaching you how to build financial models, develop and hire good company culture, etc. So you're learning those aspects as well along the way.
But it should be noted too that this isn't school, right? We don't provide you with a curriculum. You don't have to come to any of it. But like as Emily said, you're gonna, whatever you put into it, you get out of it. And exactly. We want to make sure that you're still running your business in tandem.
Got it. And going back to your previous idea in terms of, you're not investing in music companies. Traditionally, the word on the street was that, investors don't want to invest in music. It's a big no. Is that true? Is that still the case? And why so?
It's kind of true. It's true for a specific use case, which is you need to license the entire catalog of music in order to have an offering. Right? So if you think about the Spotify business model or the Apple Music or Amazon Music business model, where your product is not competitive in the market unless it has all of the music ever created at any one time, and you need to go and license all of that to put that together, that unified catalog for a listing experience. And it's very true because the sort of market economics on that make it very, very expensive for startups to start. And the reason investors are opposed to that is that they look at two startups and just use made up numbers of money there. It's like, I'm going to put $10 million into startup A, who then needs to go pay for music licenses to complete their product offering, right? They have to go buy supply on the music side so that they have a chance for users to like them. Or I could put $10 million in this other company that doesn't require the licensed content at all, and all $10 million of my investment are going to go into multiple chances to get success with customers on using the product, right? So if you just think about, in a very, very crass way, the amount of money being deployed by the company, which is the investor's capital, is buying chances for the company to succeed. So if you have to take a meaningful chunk of that investment capital and pay for licenses with it, that yes, that bought you the sort of the table stakes and the first chance, but it didn't buy you iterations or time, to change your product and grow. So you have more chances that the company without the licensed content burden is just more likely to succeed mathematically because it has more options and more flexibility into how it can spend that dollar.
Got it. So why does Techstars Music exist then?
Well, if you're a member companies, you want to attract more capital to the ecosystem, and you also need to interact with startups that are outside of that one single use case, right? Like the answer I just gave you is about a one specific thing, like, oh, we're going to compete with Spotify or we're going to compete with Apple Music. That has nothing to do with e-commerce. That has nothing to do with the security at concerts or live events. That has nothing to do with creating content in gaming environments or helping artists, digitize themselves and have a new presence. It has nothing to do with how you interact with a show, whether you're watching it online or whether you're live in the venue with your phone, right? So there's tons of opportunity around that if you're a music company, you think of those as music-related startups. If you're an investor, you think of music-related startups as companies that need to license content. Our goal is to be the bridge in between, right? So we have sort of this one room where we can remind people that there's a lot of opportunities in and around the music space that don't involve the licensing of tons of content. Not that we wouldn't invest in a company that needed to license content. We have a couple in our portfolio who have licenses and deal with licensed content. So we're not excluding that, but we're also sort of the bridge between these two worlds. We're reminding investors you need to look at this stuff, and we're helping founders get in and our member companies attract great entrepreneurs and more capital to solving problems that they care about.
In all honesty, in the companies that we have invested in that do require licenses from the major rights holders, one, the benefit to have, 2 of the 3 majors on as our membership, and Concord being the mini major, right? Like we have access and we can push some of those deals through quicker. But that being said, the companies that we have invested in, it wasn't necessarily the content that created the company, because they had an underlying technology that was really powerful. And we just had to get the content in there to be able to display that technology in order for it to, there's a bigger venture opportunity than just the music vertical, right?
Okay, it's about the technical solution to the content problem.
Yeah,
got it. And so you all have a background in the music industry, and now are dealing more with it.
Not me. Like I've never worked in music, right?
Oh,
so it's only software.
Got it. Well, then a question for Jen and Emily, who come from the core music industry, and I would love to hear from them what motivated them to switch over to tech, and how you see the future of the music business through these new eyes, technological eyes.
I was always really lucky, because having come from management and having managed Beastie Boys for as many years as I did, and even starting when I first got into the business, I was working at Grand Royal, and I was working under my boss was a man named Ian Rogers, who's then gone forward, and he's been a major player in the digital space for years. I always laugh because I was working for him in 2000, and he gave me an Amazon gift card for my birthday, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I go online and I don't get it. Like, but the boys have always been very technologically forward. They've always been ones that are pushing the edge and the envelope on what they can do using technology. So I was exposed to that with them, and just the whole kind of the expansion of your mind to think of things differently, and how technology can add to the musical experience, whether it's through distribution of music in a different way, whether it's, different technology when you're recording, whatever. There was always just this other layer that I was exposed to that I was really appreciative of. And then I took some time off to raise my kids. I've got 2 kids. So all the moms out there, hi. And then Bob called me and said, hey, I'm doing this thing. You want to do it with me? And I said, yeah, sounds really cool. I never thought I'd, get back and work into tech. And he's like, well, you don't work in tech, you work in venture capital. I was like, wow, I never thought I would do that. And then that's been, the past, almost 5 years now. And it's been fascinating, right? It's been really fascinating seeing the convergence of both of the worlds. And, when Bob and I started this originally, there was a lot of skepticism because, technology has been the wrecking ball for the music industry a few times over. And we've always been the canary in the coal mine for the movie industry too. And it took a second, but we really saw people start to come around, especially with the portfolio companies that we started with, and placing those two worlds together in a collaborative manner, and having people really see the benefits of working with tech and showing the tech community the importances and the nuances of the music industry, and being able to blend both of those together to really create a unified front has been pretty incredible to watch. And I know our first demo day, I'm sure Bob agrees, like when we had that room and we had almost every major music player in Los Angeles, and people had come in from New York and from all over the world. And we had, I don't know what, we had over 100 different venture capital investors that day too. And that room had never been created ever before in the history of music or tech, right? And then it happened, and it was a huge success. And every year it's gotten better and better and better. And that community has grown stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's to the benefit of our founders. We didn't know it was going to happen that way, but it did. So it, and here we are today.
And on my end, I come from the distribution world. So I worked in distribution, both on the major and indie side, for 8 years. And a lot of what I saw were tools that were there because that's how they existed in years prior, and just making them new, making them different based off of the requirements in the industry. And then I started working with some startups in relation to content management systems and trying to figure out some solutions for independent labels that might help. And that sparked my interest. It was like, how can you, when we were talking to founders, understanding like they're taking a step back and completely reimagining things, and how great is that for the industry to really innovate the industry, which led me here. So I started at Techstars last year, and I've successfully been the program manager for 1 year with Techstars, and I'm really, really excited to see the next year of founders.
Beautiful. And this is a great segue into the next portion of our chat. Questions are starting to come in from the audience right now, so I'm just going to dive in and address them. First one being success stories from your previous Techstars music accelerators.
Yeah,
I
can't type in. It doesn't look like I can type and respond back. I was gonna put them in there. Yeah, so Tertia, who are your Techstars music success stories so far? There's a couple of different ways to look at success for the portfolio. You can think of it as exited companies, which is sort of as investors, how we get paid, right? That's happened twice. We've had 2 exits so far. The podcasting platform Pippa was bought by Acast, which is a big European podcasting giant. That happened 2.5 years ago now. And then this spring, Superpowered, also from our 2017 class, was purchased by Splice in New York City. Both of those all-cash deals, both of them sort of life-changing transactions for those founders. So that's the 2 acquisitions, exits. In the meantime, we also have, you as an investor, you have to track sort of the markups of those companies, right? So you invested them, they're small and they're babies, and as they grow in funding and value, right, you own a little less of them, but the piece of it that you own increases in value. And so companies that you may have heard of that are on that rise would be Popgun, Community, which when we invested in it was a company called Shimmer, pivoted just after leaving our program. That would also be, there's a company a hot new company in France called Mila that does a bunch of learning stuff, doing a great big round for those guys right now, which is awesome. You probably heard of Weave. You may have heard of Replica, which is an Australian company funded by some great investors here that do replica AI-powered voices for games and immersive entertainment.
Don't forget Endel.
Yeah, giant Endel announcement today. Endel just finished their Series A this spring. They've got a really cool product they've released today. That is an AI lullaby that's the collaboration between them and Grimes. So Grimes made a bunch of stems and melodies and pieces of music that got mixed into sort of Endel science and the Endel stem base. And then now you have personalized sound environments for sleep, focus, relaxation. The Grimes stuff is particularly around taking a nap or going to bed at night. They're lullabies, sort of AI mechanical lullabies. And so those are the companies I would Blink Identity is another one, partnered with Live Nation and Ticketmaster on your face is your ticket and using high-speed biometrics to get in and out of locations and venues. So there's a long list of companies that have done really well.
From last year's program, the most recent.
Yeah,
right?
Shoes was in Rolling Stone, like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, announcing their funding round, making virtual artists. So good reminder. There's a long list, but in terms of actual exits, there are 2 so far, and it usually takes between 5 and 7 years to find out if a company's going to really develop, and then it takes probably another 5 years after that to get liquid. So it takes a little bit.
Interesting.
And then a quick plug. We're actually hosting a founder interview with one of the companies Bob just spoke about today, later tonight at 5 p.m. PT with Stephen Phillips from Popgun. So Andre, I'll send you the link in case you want to circulate that to everyone in the chat.
Yeah, that'll be a good one, actually. Like, Stephen's in a position where he's raised a bunch of money from sort of tier 1 investors. They make an AI music engine. They ended up making a Roblox game. As a really interesting play. No one would have expected that's where the company would have gone, and it's super interesting and fascinating where they are. And we're going to talk to him at 4:30 Pacific.
And to answer the girls on the front there, in terms of where in the journey would you like to see your investments? Like Popgun's a good example of, they didn't have a product, they had nothing in program. It was about at week 11 or 12 they finally got it working. Right. So we take companies in all different stages.
Great. And do founders need to be in LA for the program typically?
Normally, yes, but this year, so we're going to run entirely virtually this year. No required travel, no presence in Los Angeles. Every single thing will happen entirely virtually this year. So, in addition to sort of us committing to 50% of the CEOs in our program coming from diverse backgrounds. So that's women, people of color, LGBTQ+, military veterans, people with disabilities, right? Like we're gonna. It also means we're opening up the inclusiveness of the program, right? So if you are, every year there's at least one team that we're really interested in that has founders who have young children, or their spouse has a high-powered job in a specific place, or the founder takes care of a relative, or provides some other thing outside of their business in something that pins them to a specific location. Every year it happens, and because we require people to come to LA and be in our office so that we get convening power with sort of the network, those things haven't worked for us in the past, and it's been a bummer. This year, pandemic solves a bunch of those problems for us structurally. We'll have people from everywhere, but everybody will stay where they are and stay safe and in their local environments.
That's great. I love that mobility is not an issue this year.
Which makes the capital go farther too.
Yeah, it has pluses and minuses. Jen's point is well made, it makes the capital go further. On the downside, there's a lot of serendipity and a lot of access that happens when, if I can turn out to the market and say I have 10 companies from around the world in one room in Los Angeles, and we have venture capital, and we have investors, and we have music business, and we have artists, and we have managers, and we have labels, and everybody coming in to this one room to sort of talk about and argue and meet each other and look at the future of music together, that creates convening power for us, which is how we, in a lot of ways, create opportunity for startups. And so some of the best benefits of that are an investor is coming to see the company that sits next to you, and you end up being able to carve out 10 minutes to have coffee with that person because they're in the office. That person then makes another introduction for you. They're not the right investor for you, but they say, oh, who you need to talk to is so-and-so. Right? That connection occurs because you were able to sit around the espresso machine or hang out in the office and say hello. That doesn't happen in a Zoom world. And so there are pieces of the program that we will lose. That's just the way the world's going to work. On the flip side, the capital will go further. People will be able to stay where they are. We'll be able to introduce people, and there will be mentors who will join because they're in New York, or they're in Stockholm, or they're in London, or they're in wherever, and they maybe wouldn't have gotten to LA during our calendar, and instead they can now participate and be helpful. So we'll lose some things and we'll gain some things is basically the way to think about it.
But also we're cognizant of that serendipity too, right? And that just makes our job a bit harder in the sense that we are going to try to figure out how to create that, with the constraints that we have on the current program. And, one of the most important things, in addition to just happen to be, a table away from an investor, is being a table away from some incredible engineers on another team, right? And there's that collective problem solving that happens for everybody's company, and just the unification of the class and how they work together is something really powerful. And we're going to do our best to recreate that as best as we can in a digital format. Luckily, we've got a few months under our belt because we had to go half digital last year. So we have some guinea pigs that we can talk to and what worked and what didn't and how we can do it better. So yeah, that's definitely on the roadmap on how to make this program equally as effective as the 4 previous.
Great. I'm happy to hear there's a solution to the mobility issue and also to the inclusion issue, right? As Bob just touched on. And while we're talking about it, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into this, because it's ultimately what prompted us to have this conversation here, right? The number of female founders has significantly dropped in terms of applications this year. What can you tell us about that?
You want to break it down for us, Em? It's dismal. I mean, it's not dismal in the world.
Yeah.
By our standards, I guess is the right way to say it.
So it's gotten a little bit better over the last week, but a week prior it was at 15% of our application pool is from females, with female founder CEOs. Right now it's at 20, but we want to see that significantly increase, which is why we're here speaking to all you guys.
And the way that happens is by referral. It happens by being accessible. It happens by just talking about it. Like, I don't think we think there's any sort of thing we have to go do that's magic. We have a magic wand and this thing happens. It's just about continuous one foot in front of the other, like, like every day something different. And like we were talking before the call started, in general, we invest in female-led teams sort of at almost 3x the pace of regular venture capital. 10% of our portfolio companies are led by women. Compared to the population, though, that's pretty terrible. That it should be 50% of our portfolio companies are led by women. In fact, women leading venture companies actually leads to better outcomes, right? So there is a part of that is a bias of like the most talented people, like as a venture investor, you're looking to invest in the team that has to exist, where they don't have any other choice. They're unemployable. They're obsessed with the problem. They can't sleep at night unless they solve this problem. Like, that's the teams that succeed. And so there's a part of that which is that, like, if you are talented enough to be in that bucket, and you are a woman, like, your success credit, your success percentages are off the charts. And so the best women fight their way through that and then sort of rake a bunch of stuff. And so rake a bunch of capital. And so the results sort of skew in their favor. But the problem around that is that in this moment in time, there are sort of societal forces pushing down the other way. And we have to be really cognizant of that and just talk about it publicly so that we can sort of, alter and change it.
That's why we're unlocking more capital too, right? In terms of upward matching and other opportunities that we have, which are going to bring in a little bit more cash for diverse founders and women fall under that head.
And there's been significant progress in this space over the last few years, even if there's been a dip in number of female founders applying to the accelerator this year. There's no doubt that there has been progress in terms of diversity and inclusion in technology, in business, in the music industry over the last few years. What would you attribute that to? And again, I know it's not one thing. Is it just purely because we're talking and we're talking more about it, we're applying this pressure on people, or are there any other pointers we could look at and maybe replicate in order to ensure diversity is there in the long term?
Well, okay, so I'll answer this for myself personally. I feel like I feel like there's a bunch of people who are well-intentioned and want things to be true, but they also come from a position of privilege and they just go about their daily lives in that way. And they're like, well, look, I'm not negatively impacting this. I'm a positive force here. And so looks like things are working and getting better. The problem with that is that it sort of results in what happens is you have a bunch of like good words and you have some sort of some ideas which are good, like it's not a negative. But if you really think that you ought to you're going to make a difference in it and improve things, you have to spend money. Like, you show me the money. And so in our case, like, we spent a bunch of time this summer looking at it. And look, like, we're not immune to it. Like, you see the social justice movement in the United States all summer long, and the frustration of humans, and you're just like, look, like, what's the part of this that we actually can materially change? And so the material change we could make, and it comes with risk and effort, right? We have to be willing to do that. For us, it's let's redeploy where the money goes. So to say that half of the CEOs in our program are going to come from these backgrounds is us betting the performance of our fund. Very clearly, it's betting the performance on our fund of these CEOs. Because if our model is such that we need 4 or 5 companies out of 10 every year to enter the venture ecosystem to raise some capital, so that by the time one of them succeeds, right, 1 company out of 10 is going to succeed in our mathematics and the way venture capital works. We have to so the game is about the number of chances inside of there. And if you take half your chances and you say these people are going to be included in this setup, and you know that those underrepresented founders struggle to raise capital from $0 to $1 million, you then have to be willing to put both time and effort into including them in the program, but also go take effort to put more capital on top of them, right? So it's not like we're deploying tens of millions of dollars here. It's $1.2 million a year, right? Our fund is tiny. Most of the results we get has come from our effort, not from our cash. But we do have, like Concord is contributing an extra $30,000 in matching capital. They'll do $100,000 in conditional follow-on capital for qualifying companies that come through that diversity and inclusion, commitment in the program. So, and we have another member company we're going to talk about publicly soon that's going to match that also, right? So we're going to be in a situation where, in a normal year, you're accepted in Techstars Music, you get $120K, and you have to move to Los Angeles, and you spend some of the $120K, like just being here for the program, to a year where you get accepted into Techstars Music, you might have $180K. On acceptance, right? So there's another $60,000 available to you as a founder, and there's $200,000 in conditional commitments into that next round of capital that comes afterwards. So that's a material difference from $120,000 to potentially almost $400,000, right? $380K depending on the business and what it's working on. That's our version of how do we make this? How do we do the hard thing? How do we put real money to work and put it together? As a result of that, we need to find incredible people to invest in to do that, right? And so we just have to talk about it. We have to help people, like what you're doing right now, help us spread the word. This is where we are. We have to be willing to listen to people's feedback about it. What about that is awkward or offensive to some people, right? There are things about this that we have to be willing to sort of take some awkward conversations and some slings and arrows on. But ultimately, it comes from a place for us of, hey, we think we can get a really nice return on this capital, and we also think we have a moral obligation to help build the society and the music business that we want. Let's figure out a way to do both of those things at the same time. So this is sort of our version of it.
I love that, and I love that values like having a moral responsibility and thinking long term and operating with integrity. These are all values that are embedded in the Techstars Manifesto or mission. I believe I was reading through that the other day, and I think the music industry needs and welcomes these values more and more. And it's been happening with the clash of music and technology over the last few years. So overall, we're hoping that things are moving in a more positive direction. Let's jump back into Techstars Music Accelerator questions. We have Nene and Jess here with a question whether the services are applicable for the program or strictly companies that sell products.
That's a great question. Almost exclusively, services are not applicable in the program. The reason for that is that we're looking for like venture scale companies. So there's this weird trope that bugs me because I don't like the way it sounds. Where people's like, well, most services companies are small businesses, right? That's not the right way to think about it. I think it's that has sort of a like small businesses are bad and big, like it's not good or bad. But we're looking for venture scale opportunities. And so the cheat sheet that I give founders on this all the time is if your company builds a consumer product used by consumers, we have to believe that your product can be used by 100 million people in the next sort of 3 to 4 years, right? If you can get to 100 million people, you can get to 1 billion people. So the question is, can we see a path to 100 million users for your consumer tech? If you're a B2B product, we need to, the same number is $100 million, and we need to see that in annual revenue. So the question is, do we believe you that there's a path to $100 million in annual revenue? If you're providing a service, you're effectively like providing your expertise and your execution, right, to your client or to your customer. It effectively works on an agency business model most of the time. Those can be viable revenue streams inside of larger companies, right? Like if you think of Salesforce, the Salesforce product is Salesforce CRM. That's a multi-hundred millions of dollars in quarterly revenue. They also have a services business. They have Salesforce Consulting, where you can hire their solution experts to install Salesforce CRM for you. And that's also a couple of $100 million a quarter business for them. But that business came second to the product business. The product business existed first, and then the implementation and services business got layered on top. So it's not that services businesses are bad. It's that services businesses don't create sort of billion-dollar companies in general. They usually become smaller business units or add-on revenue streams of those larger companies. So at the stage we're investing, when it's 4 people in a prototype or 3 people and some half-broken code, we need to be able to see how this becomes a product. Could be a B2B product, could be a consumer product, but it's like we've deviated from that only in a couple of places where what we're talking about, where instead of in this case, you would still call it a product company. The product is IP and media assets and artists rather than code or something that consumers use. But it's very hard to see how a services company fits.
Got it. So I guess that's a great segue into the next question that we got from Asli Kaimaz. She emailed her question over. What are the conditions for startups to join the accelerator? Are there any minimum requirements other than the services limitation? We'd like to talk about it inside of Techstars across the board methodology-wise as team is the first 3 most important qualifications for a startup. And then it is market, opportunity, and idea. So if you think about it in that case, like idea basically is on the list so that you can see it's number 6 and last. Team, what's the market? How big is this? Like, is the potential universe of customers for your product 10 people? Oh, it's probably not going to get to $100 million or 100 million users then. Is it every alive human being on Earth? Okay, now we're talking. And then what's your opportunity? Like, do you have an opportunity to get 10% of them, 1% of them, 50% of them, right? How is it going to work so that we can see that path to sort of planetary scale growth? That's really how it works. So some companies have more traction than others. Some companies don't have enough. Like, we do a good job, I think, of doing no harm to people who applied to get into our process. Like, if you get into our process, we're going to introduce you to a bunch of people. We're going to push you and challenge you. We're going to tell you why we don't see a path for your business. And if we ultimately pass on your business, you're going to know why. Like, it's not going to be a mystery. We do get an enormous amount of inbound, right? So there's a bunch of people come in publicly, they apply, they fill out an application. Not everybody that fills out an application can we sit down and meet and have sort of a one-on-one conversation with. Like, we do our best to get to as many of them as we possibly can that are even remotely promising. But the best way sort of to think about our process is we need to figure out, are you human beings that we believe in unequivocally? And are you working to solve a problem that if you succeed, we as investors will reap gigantic financial rewards from? That's
and also, for us too, red flag when looking at companies is, do you have a technical co-founder? Or is part of your core team the technical team, right? And there's a lot of times where people don't have that, and they think that, oh, I can come to Techstars Music and I'll find my tech team that way, which you know, for you to be able to get the most out of the program, we rarely deviate from just the rule of you need to have your tech team in-house because you have to push code quickly in order to really iterate your product the way you need to get the max amount out of the program. And we look at it as we're not going to be able to deliver to you everything we can if you don't have, you know, X, Y, and Z.
Got it. That's really useful to know because it basically means just because I have an idea for a tech product, it doesn't mean that my idea will select it. I need to have all these other building blocks around me, especially the technical team, really, to execute on that idea.
And a founder could also be the person who's writing all the code too.
Right.
Like that, we just need to have, you know, that tech underbelly in order to really help you.
We invest in teams, not ideas.
That makes sense. That's super useful to know. All right, moving on to the next question, COVID related, from Girls to the Front, who just posted it on YouTube. How does COVID affect your investment plan? Are you looking for businesses that are making tech to support the current climate, or are you looking at the future like it might go back to normal?
Well, considering that, you know, in terms of venture investment, you know, we look at our returns in a 5 to 7 year span. So I hope to God we're still not living in COVID 7 years from now. Has the landscape changed? Possibly. Has consumption changed? Possibly. But I personally, I'm a believer that, you know, I don't think that the way things are so constricted digitally now is not going to be the norm. It's not going to be what we're going to be in a year and a half, 2 years. So if we invest in solutions that are only applicable for the next 6 months, I personally don't think that's a really good use of our capital.
I'm thinking about it in terms of habits, right? Like the pandemic has created winners and losers. It's been incredibly beneficial for in-home fitness. It's been amazing for online education. But there, like in a lot of those ways, those companies sort of, if you think about it, a good example is in-home fitness. In-home fitness had a bunch of competition, right? It was really useful. It had a good value prop. You're at home. You don't have to go anywhere. You can work out and collaborate with people online. You can have an amazing fitness experience in your house. They still had to compete with, but I like to go to the gym and see people, and I have friends there, and it's close to my office, or I like to be outside, and I like to go to do this, right? So there was all these things that were also good that you had to compete with. And so in a lot of categories, in-home fitness, online education, right? Like the normal like habits of society, competition pieces were artificially removed for a minute. And what that allows people to do is make new habits. So if you think about it not as this is a solution because of the pandemic, but hey, because of the pandemic and the way we are living our lives in quarantine with less interaction with other humans and much more virtual experiences, what habits are we forming and creating that are going to stick, even when we get into a place where we can go back into an arena or where we can go back to a restaurant or a nightclub, right? We were still going to have like for example, my children can't stand Zoom school, right? They're still homeschooling. They're doing everything from Zoom school. But there are parts of it that they really like, which is that they can ask questions without raising their hand, and they know that if they type the question while the thing is happening, they're going to get an answer, as opposed to raise your hand, which is like pretty old tech for I want to ask a question. And if the teacher moves on, the burden is on them to come back and keep asking that question to get sort of that one-on-one answer, which is that but my son has realized, I just type all my questions out and I know that my teacher is going to answer them because I delivered them and we have this expectation and habit formed of if questions come in, they're going to get answered, right? Same way in this call, if we don't get to a submitted question, we'll type up an answer and we'll send it to you. So that is a are we going to always do conferences and calls like this? We'll keep doing them, right? But it'd be kind of cool if we get together in person sometime too. But we might still have that obligation of now we've submitted all the questions. There's a device to submit the questions on. That information goes back and forth. So I think about it from a deploying capital standpoint as, is it changing the way the wind's blowing? Is it changing our consumer habits? I'm not doing anything in particular as a result of investing in a specific COVID solution.
Yeah, I think what gets me just is that, especially in terms of words within that particular question, is support the current climate. Like, no to that, but how is consumption being changed? How are our user habits being changed? How is that going to work in tandem to everything working back up, opening back up? In what ways have our lives been made easier, and that we're not going to want to give up?
Yeah.
Exactly. For example,
to that question, exactly right at the end, like we're always looking at the future. We're never looking at how it would go back to. Like nothing ever goes back.
No.
So we're always looking for the future. We're always looking 5 to 7 years out. To the point where some of the stuff that we invest in, people look at us and go, "Are you crazy? That's not a thing." And you're like, "Well, not yet. It isn't."
Right.
That's always our posture. Well said.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Culture has changed. Like I was listening to a story on NPR saying there's not going to be any more snow days on the East Coast because they've realized they don't have to have snow days, that they can have Zoom school now. So
that's a good example, right? Like nobody likes Zoom school, but there's no more, it can't go to school today because it snowed. It'd be like, nah, everybody,
log in.
Here's the link, log in, let's go.
I guess some habits are here to stay.
Exactly. What are those? And what are your ideas around those?
In music, would you say that gaming and music coming together, is that a long-term sort of new habit here to stay?
100%. Gaming, the intersection of gaming and music, the intersection of fitness and music. Fitness is one of the number one discovery zones for new music right now. And gaming, it's a really interesting place, but it's definitely, you get active users.
Yeah.
This is where I needs to plug that conversation with Steven again. Like
I was about to say that.
Like that's all we're going to talk about this afternoon. You're going to see demos of it. He's going to talk about it. It's crazy. Like when I was a kid in the Midwest, you went to the mall to hang out with people. Nobody goes to the mall. They go to Roblox and they go to Minecraft and they go to Fortnite. That's the mall. And so like a bunch of social life and a bunch of like culture discovery and a bunch of bonding and friendship comes from these environments. They are not games like we think of games as middle-aged people. They're places.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Reminds me of Merck. I don't know if you've ever used MIRC as a platform where before I had internet in my house, and I'm from Romania, so internet got to us later. We would go to these internet cafes and we would log into Merck to meet people online. ASL PLS sort of thing, that's what Roblox and Minecraft feels like to me right now.
For sure, right? Like there's a reason that I've been Bob Moz online since IRC, and the same part of that is the same thing, right? Like IRC was definitely a place. It was not a product.
Yeah, exactly. All right, a question from Jen Miller. How do you go about fundraising? What are some common mistakes made in this process? I suppose this is from a startup perspective, from a founder's perspective.
And number one mistake, one of the big mistakes is not knowing the thesis of the fund that you're pitching. So you go in and you waste a bunch of time talking to a bunch of VCs that will never invest in your company anyway, just because it's not in the company thesis. So really not doing your due diligence on where you're going to pitch your idea.
Yeah, the way to think about that, that's a good practical answer. Like is don't pitch people who haven't already said they're interested in what you're building. Like a deeper version of that is don't try to persuade anyone ever. Like it happens probably 5 or 6 times a season to us, where we'll get into a conversation with someone and we'll look it back and forth and we'll get some feedback, and then I'll call them and I'll tell them we're going to pass, like we're not interested, and they will try to tell me why I'm wrong. Why would you do that? Like, why would you want someone on what is going to be a 5 to 10 to maybe 15-year journey with you, where you're going to have to talk to them all the time, that you talked into being there? Why? Like, you know what I mean? Like if you offered someone a job and said, we'd like you to come work here, and they were like, no, I'm not into it. I don't believe in your company. I don't buy it. I don't think you will succeed. You would not try to persuade that person to come work for you. You would be like, no, I can't. If you don't buy what we're doing, if you're not in all the way, you can't be here, right? Like you need people who are down for the mission. And so there's a lot of founders think of it as, I have to persuade someone this is going to be a thing and then they will give me money. No, you need to find the people who are trying to give you money who just don't know you yet. And that's how you're going to raise capital, period. Like you're going to, like, if an investor hasn't decided this is Thesis for us, this is an investment we want to make, they're not going to make it. So just so it's very clear for founders, investors are out there either having made a very bad and vague thesis that they don't communicate very well, or they have made a very rigorous and clear, crisp and clean one. But for the most part, they're out in the market looking for investments they want to make. They're not trying to lean back and have deals come to them and evaluate them and go forward. The problem with that is they often give the impression that they are, because investors are information collectors, right? Our job is to collect information and preserve optionality. And so no one likes to tell you no. And investors do this all the time to founders. They'll ghost them or drag them out, or maybe, I'm not sure, it's a little early. What if you do come back when you have this, put this, like, no, all of that is optionality. And it's not malicious. It's just in their best capitalist interest. It's in their economic interest. If I tell you no, you stop giving me information. You stop sending me pitch decks. You stop telling me who your other investors are. You stop giving me traction metrics. You stop giving me information that I can use not to invest in you, but to decide if I want to invest in some other company and measure the market and figure it out. So I want as many sources of information as I can possibly get. And so founders, what they need to be aware of is, like, if you can't get someone to a crisp yes or no, it's probably just no. And you need to, and the what was the expression that was, like, what was the dating expression? They're just not that into you. Like, that's cool. There's other fish in the sea, right? That's the attitude you kind of have to take, because investors are very bad at saying no because it cuts off their information. It's usually not malicious, or they're trying to manipulate.
They're doing their job. That's their job.
They're doing their job. Yeah, exactly.
That's their job. Their job is to know everything about everyone everywhere. That doesn't mean that they're putting money everywhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so how do you reconcile that with the idea that investors invest in people, in teams? So maybe someone presents themselves as a really strong founder, really smart, but they might not just have the right idea. Would you still go for that person? Or
3 magic words, though, Bob. You have to agree on this. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Any founder that is like, if we we pose a question to them and they say, I don't know, I haven't thought of it that way, let me get back to you. That to us is like, gold. Gold.
But specifically around the team versus the thesis piece, right? So think of it as a professional sports team. Like, this is the clearest analogy I can make on this. We need a player to play a specific position. That's Thesis. We believe someone's going to build a company kind of like this, right? Like, I have been saying publicly for 5 years now, someone is going to make a casual mobile game where the output of that is real artists and real music. Mm-hmm. Been trying to make that investment for 5 years. I have not found the players that I believe in that can go on the field and succeed playing that position in our portfolio.
Interesting.
That's the way to think about it, right? So, to use the sports analogy, hey, we all agree we need a goalie, and what's the goalie list look like? Terrible. Okay, well, I guess we're gonna go into this season without a goalie. So, we're not, just because we have Thesis on it doesn't mean we're gonna invest in the first thing that comes along either.
Makes sense. I'm conscious of the time, and we have just about a minute left, so I'm gonna take one final question. And that came through Brady aside. Five music tech companies would you recommend us to look at in order to get versed in the music tech space, or as good role models to look at in terms of growing your company?
What's your company? What are you doing in the music tech space? Right? That's so broad. That's what's so great about the music vertical, is it's security, it's e-commerce, it's there's so many different types of companies that it can be, that you can. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's hard for me, Bob. What do you think?
I think I would answer this a different way, and it's possible I'm not understanding the question correctly, but I would answer this question in a here we go, potentially offensive way. Here's how we go out. Ready? No one wants to invest in your company because you love music. I don't give a shit.
Yes.
I just don't care. I want to invest in a business.
Yeah.
So what I want you to, if you're going to look for role model companies to understand how it's going, show companies that if there's analog companies where it's, and I don't want to invest in your Uber for dog walking either. I want to invest in something unique and interesting that you created. But if there are, to the point that there are analogies and there are business models that work in other industries, and you can see how those things get applied, that's interesting. And so I would study business models, understand how unit economics work in that business, understand how it works at the macro, show how the money flows. And if you can see a way where money flows, wow, that is an awesome money-making machine. There's an opportunity that where that model could be applied in this industry or this category. That's music to my ears, right? So you need to understand how that works. It's very rare that a company reinvents a business model from scratch. It is often what they do is they see a way something is working, and then they have the epiphany of oh, there's a problem in category X, and if you could solve this problem, you could then install a different business model. And the reason that good business model is not in this category is because there's problem X. And so if we can solve this problem, we can now bring in this other business model and install it here. That's how a bunch of companies work, right? That's Uber, that's Airbnb, right? That's a bunch of, that's Dropbox, right? That's
community too.
Great. It's communities on their way, right? They're trying, they're starting, but thinking about PillPack, successful exits in Techstars Fund, right? Uber, PillPack, SendGrid, right? Those are all companies that did that, where it was there was this other existing known business model was awesome and a fountain of money. There's a problem blocking it from coming to this category. Let's remove that problem. Let's solve that. Now we can apply this business model. Fountain of money gets created. So I hope I'm helping answering that question. But if you're oh, I just really want to break into music, and I need to come up with a startup idea so I can do that, it ain't gonna happen. We're not interested. No one is.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. Okay, so then I'm gonna wrap it up with this final question. In terms of studying business models or looking outside of the music business for inspiration, where should we look? For beginners.
For beginners.
Business people.
I would read a couple of books. I would think about it in terms of there's a couple places I would look for inspiration. I would read The Innovator's Dilemma and The Innovator's Solution, the classic Clayton Christensen strategy disruption books. I would also subscribe to Ben Thompson's Stratechery blog, where he covers a lot of media and a lot of tech stuff. It'll cost you $100 a year. It's worth every penny. I would read Rich Greenfield at Lightshed Partners. He's an analyst who covers Disney and a bunch of other he's a stock analyst. You're welcome, Tertia. Thanks for watching. I'm just seeing the comments pop in there. I think those three are really, I think I would subscribe to The Information, which is a really good source run by a woman named Jessica Lesson. It's an awesome company that just look at their org charts, figure out how they track and cover. I would read Kara Swisher. I think Kara Swisher, as opinionated as she is and politically motivated sometimes as she is, she's spot on and super smart and asks hard questions in good ways. So I would just absorb sort of the culture of building businesses with ideas and information and technology, rather than try to go study any individual one business. Super. And
nice.
Mark Suster, who's a VC at Upfront Ventures here in LA, he's got a blog called Both Sides of the Table. I think the idea was he was an entrepreneur and then he became an investor. He's got a couple of posts on there about how to build relationships with investors. One's called the best one is called Lines Not Dots. It's a classic super classic blog post about interacting with investors. I would read that and digest that. But I would also, he also has a post about sort of like the is it time for you to work in a big company and learn about how things work, or is it time for you to start a company? And it's a really good post. I'm not going to do the title justice. I think it's like Learn or Earn or something like that. You can find it with some basic digging on his blog. But he basically breaks down like the most successful founders have been in a position where they've had some apprenticeship, they've worked inside of something else, they've been able to see how other companies function prior to going out and doing their own thing. It's very, and you know, there's always the exception that proves the rule, but there's certain parts of your career where you have to think about it in terms of, have I learned the skills to do this thing? And I'm positioned myself where I know people and I have network and I can recruit engineers and I can go do this and I know who to call to put something together and be persuasive? Or do I need to go learn and meet those people and learn how the world works and put it together? So I know that's not specifically the question you asked, but that's kind of, I think, how I would try to tackle it.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think there's a lot of people, both in our community and in general in the music industry, wondering if they should quit their job to start their company now or do it in parallel for a while, or, you know, how to go about it. But most importantly, to look outside of the music industry and into business models, proven business models, and other smart people out there in the world at the forefront of it. That's super valid advice. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Bob, Jen, Emily. This has been really insightful. Thank you. We haven't had the chance to address all questions, but I think we could go on forever anyway. Hopefully this was useful to everyone watching. Thank you to you all, Tersha, Jennifer, Annette, everyone listening. Thanks once again. We will post this video on YouTube. It will stay as a recording there. And don't hesitate to reach out if you have further questions to us at hello@shesaid.so. And hopefully we'll continue this partnership, this relationship with Techstars Music in the future. Good luck with the applications coming in. Hopefully there's more women coming on board and other underrepresented folks. We'll be here watching and supporting from the sidelines.
Right on. Thanks for doing it. And send us the questions. We'll get answers to people.
Perfect. We'll make sure to collect more from everyone watching and send them over to you.
Right
Thanks
on.
so much. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Great day, everybody. Cheers.
Bye.